Speaking of tactics again, I love the death noise that the characters make. Yeah, the characters make in that game. Love it. It's haunting, man, but it's amazing at the same time. Beautiful. The death wails of 2D sprites on a fucking 3D polygonal field is just beautiful to me. Hello and welcome back to the JoyCircuit podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Hoagland of the Tantalus Theater Group, and today I am joined by the Warrior of Light, Alex Tanner.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
I am also joined by Joseph DeCoste, former soldier first class, who now mainly focuses on academia.
Soldier represent.
Joe, you
finally settled on the right side of the continent.
That's right. Your cross Canada trek went well.
I survived.
You survived. You didn't get corona, as far as you know.
Well, 6 days into isolation, and things are looking good. So I made it, I think.
You probably haven't had much chance to play anything. You know, what with moving in and everything.
I played one tutorial match of Spellbreak just to try to remind myself what the controls were. But then nobody else was online to play a real match, so I just left it.
And I saw that you purchased Crusader Kings 3, but you haven't played it yet, have you?
No, it's actually, I can see it from where I'm at right now, and I'm on the menu screen ready to start a new game, but waiting for a desk because, you know, you play these games, they're like turn-based, and you cannot stop. Like, you always need one more turn. Yeah. And I don't think my back can handle one more turn for like 12 hours straight right now. So I'm gonna hold off until I have a desk.
So have you ever played any other games in this series? I know the new one came out and it seems that it's really good, but I don't know anything about this series. Do you have any experience with it, or is there anything you can sort of fill me in on?
Yes.
I assume it's some sort of strategy game.
Tragedy?
Strategy. Strategy?
Yeah.
What did I say?
I heard tragedy game. I was like, I mean, I guess medieval times were probably a pretty tragic time to live for everybody. So in that sense,
I think this is just another example of our Nova Scotian lisp that we've been talking about.
Yeah. So I have played. So this is a Paradox game. So they make these grand strategy games. I played Crusader Kings 2. I think I forgot that I played it, but it's on my Steam and it has hours on it, so I played it. Okay. I think they also do Europa Universalis. I think that's the same developer. So I put hours into that, and the last game I think they came out with was Imperator. I think it's the same idea. These are all these grand strategy games. And the big thing that I'm super excited about this one is there's always been a huge focus on diplomacy and sort of political maneuvering to the strategy side of things. It's not just a fight, build an army, and go conquer everyone thing. But it seems like they've added a lot of richness and a lot of depth to this game, where to the point that you could almost not even really focus on the battle system at all. You can just like basically go through marriages and different ways. Like there's a whole new spy system, I think, that you can get into, and you can do a lot without even really messing around with the combat. So really rich, really deep. I'm looking forward to get into it. I think the most telling thing, I can't remember the guy's name, but the reviewer for IGN who gave it a 10 out of 10 made the statement that if he could only play one game for the rest of his life, it would be Crusader Kings 3. That's a pretty big endorsement.
That's high praise.
Yeah, so I'm super hyped for it, if you can't tell.
You'll have to give us an update on later episodes.
Yeah.
Alex, you mentioned that you've been playing a little game that came out. It's called Genshin Impact. Now, again, similar to Crusader Kings, I know very little about this game. I know that it was developed by a Chinese studio, and that it is free to play, and I believe it's some sort of action RPG. Is it also open world?
Yes, it is. But before we get into that, Jeremy, I just want to say, glad to be here. Glad to be talking to you guys. Hope everything's going well with both of you. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Alex.
Good.
Yeah.
So Genshin Impact, it originally upon reveal was thought to be a Breath of the Wild clone, just mainly due to the aesthetic. But it's actually, I don't know how to best describe it. It kind of is. There are a lot of elements that carry over from Breath of the Wild, strangely enough. There's exploration, there's like a glider, you can climb up stuff. But it's like they ripped Breath of the Wild apart and then put it back together in a way that they could make money. So there's a lot of waifus. It's like a gotcha thing. Okay. But it's cool.
Gotta love those waifus, man.
Well, as soon as you get waifus in a game, I'm in, right? Fire Emblem.
Some of us can't have real wives, so I mean, we got to take the next best thing.
I don't know. I don't really understand why that is a thing, but Fire Emblem Heroes, I spent way too much time on that game, so I don't know. But it is fun. The combat's actually pretty enjoyable. If you're good at like kiting and stuff, you can fight enemies way higher level than you. You switch between 4 members. There's like every character has like an element, so there's like team synergy. There's all these attacks you can do. It's really fun. It's cool, actually. I do like it. And I've also been playing Spellbreak with Joe and Nick. Joe's been gone, but me and Nick have been playing quite a lot the last couple of weeks, and we do good. We win a lot. It's fun.
Nice.
Nick was praising your fire skills today.
Yeah, was he?
Yeah, he was saying that that's the new meta for playing fire, that you've been a pioneer of the fire meta.
Fire.
This Nick character, he's mentioned in I feel like most JoyCircuit podcast episodes.
I don't think his name is real though. I don't think it's a real person. Nick Pick? Who names their child Nick Pick?
It sounds like a joke to me. It sounds like a bad
To be
joke.
fair, Nicholas Pickles from YTV's video and arcade top 10. That wasn't his real name, I don't believe. So,
for those of you who don't know, YTV, it was a Canadian. I think it still is a Canadian kids channel, basically, cartoons and stuff like that.
It was. Now it's like weird, like Disney live action shows. I don't know, but
who the fuck knows what's going on? But in the 90s, dude, YTV was the shit.
It was. Maybe that should be a discussion for another time. I would love to go into YTV with you guys sometime.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I'm down. But yeah, Nick Pick, not a real person, just a figment of our imagination.
What was like the show? I don't know why I can't remember the name now. But what was like the main show on YTV that had like the host?
The
and
Zone.
Stuff? What was that called?
The Zone.
The Zone. Yeah. God, The Zone was awesome.
It was so good.
What was the girl's name?
Sugar.
Sugar, yeah.
You know them all. You know
all
the YTV lore.
Her, man.
I do. Yeah, I love YTV. I watched YTV. I had that behind me while I was gaming until I was probably like 19 or 20. Like I loved YTV.
I was a Teletoon guy.
Were you?
Kept it locked.
See, I absolutely loved YTV as well, Alex. But I think around the age of like 13, 14, I transferred over to Much Music, and that was like my main thing for like my teenage years. Like we've mentioned, Joe is back in Nova Scotia here. So soon we're all going to be able to record together once again in person, which I think will be really good for the flow of the show and just general vibes.
I would also add that we are transitioning pretty much to full video as well. So
full video, yes.
Update.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned that.
Update will now be video, and we'll be going through some changes not in terms of the content, but in terms of the delivery, I guess, and the feel of the show.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome, boys. We're finally getting to the point where I think we can kind of take it to the next level, start getting the show out there more.
Feels like we've been doing this a long time in some form or another, but
maybe we'll do an episode someday of the origins of JoyCircuit.
I don't know if we should. Those were weird times, man. Some of those meetings just hanging out, some of us crying, some of us getting emotional about weird shit. Like we had some weird little meetings.
Who cried? Was it me?
We've all. I mean, both. I think multiple people have probably cried.
The show is built on our tears.
Yeah, they were.
And I heard there may be some lost episodes out there that may surface at some point.
Yeah, maybe.
They might. I don't know. Well, you never know.
At some point, we have to release them, Jimmy, just for fun.
When we get to 1 million subscribers,
Okay.
Lost episodes coming out.
Go.
So make sure you subscribe.
If we get a Patreon, then maybe, because you'd have to really like us to want to watch these pieces of shit that we produced. So Final Fantasy 16 was recently announced during the opening of the September PlayStation 5 showcase. So if you haven't seen this trailer, please go check it out. It's about 4 minutes long. I was very pleasantly surprised when I saw that this was the first trailer that they showed. So I'm just going to start off with a sort of play-by-play of the trailer, just sort of describing it to anyone listening at home who hasn't seen the trailer or doesn't want to watch the trailer, or just as a refresher. So basically, the first thing we see on screen is text stating that the following content is captured on PC, emulating the PS5 experience. When I saw this, I was like, ooh, I don't know quite what that means, but we can get into that later. The trailer then opens with what I'm assuming is a main character. He's got a sort of masculine look with shaggy hair and a face tattoo, and he's involved in some sort of armed conflict where they are targeting Shiva's dominant. So these dominants seem to be basically the human vessel for each summon, which are referred to as icons in this universe. Not icon, I-C-O-N, but E-I-K-O-N, which kind of reminds me of the spelling for Eidolon that they've used in previous games. I think Final Fantasy IX was one of them. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit. The trailer then cuts to a castle city where we meet Joshua, who appears to be a young prince or some form of royalty, and another main character who is sworn to protect him. So this character's appearance is more in line with what we expect from a Final Fantasy protagonist. We see more chocobos. We see a white one. We then witness our first glimpse of combat involving the new main character and an imp-like creature. And then later we see the iconic Malboro in a swamp setting. Cut between this, we see a political discussion of sorts taking place, where something called the Blight and the Mother Crystal is mentioned. We then return to Joshua in an intense scene that sees him sort of sprayed with blood, which seems to bring out his latent powers as a dominant, with eventually him summoning a phoenix. Okay. It is then revealed that Final Fantasy 16 is, in fact, a PlayStation 5 console exclusive, and this was later clarified as being a full exclusive for 6 months and console exclusive for 12 months. This trailer blew me away. Got me absolutely hyped for the PlayStation 5 showcase.
So similar to you, I was pumped. Like, we were watching this at the same time and texting in a group chat, like, both extremely hyped about this. We all love Final Fantasy here, and I'm personally looking for some games to get hyped about, and this is pretty much number 2 after Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 for me. Very excited about this for a number of reasons, which we'll go into later. But I thought the trailer was great. I thought it did a great job. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was correct in the presentation to start off with this as well. I know we're not really critiquing the PS5 presentation, but I thought this, if there was a game you could use to hype up long-time gamers, I feel like Final Fantasy is up there. I know the brand has lost some of its prestige and respect in the industry after a decade or two of so-so titles, but this looks fantastic.
Yeah, so for me, I would say, like, I wouldn't say that I'm hyped for this game, but I would say that this trailer for me just kind of activated the hype meter. So before, I wasn't really, like, I know, Alex, I think we're probably hyped just to get an announcement and a reveal. I've kind of been floating around knowing it's going to come sometime, but out of the cycle of being hyped for Final Fantasy games, aside from, obviously, I'm hyped for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, but for new mainline ones, I still don't really know what to expect. But this was enough to kind of pique my interest and kind of get that hype meter activated. I'm interested in seeing what else they deliver. I think they're going to deliver more in 2021, so probably not anything else soon. But it's enough to get it on the radar. And I would say probably the biggest takeaway is I'm not disappointed and I'm not necessarily worried or concerned having seen this trailer. But guess I'm just cautiously optimistic for it, and I'm ready to get hyped. I'm just wondering if this is the point where, because obviously we all watched the trailer. I have a little bit of a different interpretation, at least on one point here from you.
Okay. Yeah. No. Please. Yeah. What I broke down. Please contest any of that. If feel free, because like I said, that's just my sort of quick run.
And can I add one thing too?
So
when you guys, before we get into the breakdown, I just want to say about Final Fantasy as a whole. I think part of the reason I am hyped is because there was a time just before Final Fantasy 15 came out where there were like internal murmurs and kind of there was rumors that the Final Fantasy series was almost dead. That if 15 didn't perform properly, there wouldn't be a 16. So for me, I guess this is confirmation that where they've taken the series recently with that council they've created and everything has been sufficient enough for Square Enix, I guess, to proceed with the series. And now that they're kind of going different ways with different studios taking hold, hopefully that means good things to come. But
that's great, Alex. That's a good point. And we will get more into the development, or at least what we know of the development of this game a little bit later in the show. So yeah, we'll get into all of that. And I think you're right. I think it's going in a positive direction from a development standpoint at the very least.
Yeah.
Which is promising. Now, Joe, what did you want to dispute?
Okay, so
from my summary.
Yeah, so Alex, you can weigh on this too. So I watched the trailer and you see the kind of the grizzled old veteran sitting in front of the fire at the beginning, who's obviously a main character. Later on, you see a young protector sworn sword of Joshua. I'm pretty sure they're the same person.
I agree, Joe. I think
this
they're
is
too.
Multiple timelines, and the young guy
Really?
is the same character.
Yeah, I agree.
And
see, I have an entirely different take.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's the case. It's the same guy. If you look at the eyes at the end, it's the exact same eyes. And I think obviously whatever happens in that flashback, I think is what triggers a revenge mission in this main character, that he then becomes this grizzled guy who's out on revenge. We don't necessarily know what for. It's just obviously surrounding that event, I think. So that's my take.
Me too, Joe.
I think it's right.
That is interesting, Joe, because I have a completely different take, and I actually had this talking point like later on in the show, and I'm going to remove it and just talk about it now because we're on it. To me, it seemed like there was two different main characters who are actually enemies, and they're probably come together at some point, but it seems like they're on opposite sides of the faction. And I thought that would be really cool. But maybe my mind has just been warped by The Last of Us Part 2, because that's basically what that there's two main characters in The Last of Us 2 who are enemies and they're trying to kill each other. That's immediately what I thought when I saw this. And to be honest, I kind of hope that I'm right. I'm probably not, actually, because the point you just made, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I would prefer it. I think it would be interesting to go the other route, though, if they're actually two different characters.
What if they're identical twins?
That's another thing that's totally possible.
Okay, so actually my first instinct on first watching the trailer was the same thing. I thought that these were, because first time I watched it, I wasn't able to catch the similarities between characters. I just thought they were two different characters. And then they had the kind of face thing at the end where they show one face and then the other. And then they show the blue kind of, I guess it's, or like the purpley Ifrit light stream and the red Phoenix light stream that clash. And I thought that was showing that these two characters had some big intertwined fate and that they were against each other. But I'm pretty sure now that it's just two different timelines, because the guy is, to me, he's definitely the same guy. But I agree. I was actually super stoked to have this face off between these two closely attached characters in some kind of revenge thing as well. So I'm happy with it either way.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Because I literally, that never even dawned on me. That's very interesting. Damn. And also it's Final Fantasy, so who knows? It could be some combination of both of these theories, to be honest.
Yeah.
It could be a whole bunch of things. It might make no fucking sense.
It may. That very well. There could be, the later time period could come before the earlier time period, and you go back in time. We don't know. It could be anything at this point.
This isn't Nomura.
And I feel like especially if they're showing it in a trailer, I feel like they're going to hide enough that they're going to be able to twist it a lot and give you. I don't think you want to give people a good idea of exactly what's going on in a trailer. So you probably are trying to specifically make them think wrong things so that when the real thing happens, they're like, what? So.
Well, that's right, because it was definitely cut that way to make you think that is what's going on, that they're two separate characters on different factions. But who knows, man? Now you got me thinking. Yeah. Alex, what did you say about Nomura? Nomura's not involved, so it might actually make sense.
Yeah, exactly. You guys were saying the timelines could be anything. Like, I don't think Nomura's not here, guys. It's going to be probably pretty normal. But
true. Yoshida's tame, I guess, in that respect.
Yeah.
And then I just wanted to make one kind of parallel too. So icons are also in Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah.
They're just another name for the primals, which are basically the Ifrits and Garudas and stuff, and Titans in Final Fantasy XIV. So there is precedent for icons in Final Fantasy.
Cool. Like I said, I thought it was some sort of play on Eidolons. But yeah, my limited experience with A Realm Reborn, I only played the beta, so yeah, I don't know too much about Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah, that's fair.
Cool. That's awesome. Thank you for clearing that up for me and opening my mind a little bit. Wow. So I'm just going to give a little bit of a clarification on the setting, and this is literally just taken from the Final Fantasy XVI Wikipedia page, so take that as you will. But just a little write up here. It says it is set in a fantasy world that is divided by several factions. The world is suffering from a malady called the Blight, which is kept at bay by the Mother Crystal. I think we could gather that much from the trailer, more or less. And again, a central part of the plot are icons, which are summoned monsters controlled by or manifesting through humans, which are dubbed dominants. And the mystery of the game is the appearance of these two icons of fire, Phoenix and Ifrit. So that's sort of just a little bit of clarification on what we saw in the trailer. This thing about the Blight, we know that it is some sort of disease, I guess, and there is a Mother Crystal. I'm assuming there might be, it seems like from the trailer, there might be more than one Mother Crystal. I don't know. That wouldn't make sense, though, that there would be multiple Mother Crystals, but I guess I was kind of thinking that each kingdom would have a crystal or something like that, but I don't know. What are your guys? So we've seen a bit of the setting and like we can kind of speculate on the story. So what do you guys think about this setting? Do you think the sort of medieval fantasy, more traditional fantasy setting is good? Do you think the characters are I think we already have kind of said that we are definitely intrigued by the main characters at the very least. So just kind of give me some of your thoughts on all that based on what we know so far.
Sure. So I like it. I think the setting is appropriate, as we discussed in kind of what we were expecting from 16 in the Final Fantasy ranking podcast. The return to kind of old, like classic fantasy is probably the right move. I like the focus on summons and crystals and all the old school Final Fantasy stuff. At the same time, I feel like there's a lot of parallels to a lot of the games we've seen recently. I feel like depending, like just from the story trailer, depending on how you interpret it, there could be a lot of things that are similar to 15. Again, multiple kingdoms at war, each having like a crystal or in this case, potentially a crystal or a summon, trying to like assassinate and conquer each other. There's an empire. We may potentially see a time skip, as Joe is talking about. Action combat. There's a lot of elements that could potentially be, very similar, but hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully it is a bit different. I think Joe was right. I do think it's a time jump. I think we see like a punished version of the main character a couple years later after something happened to Joshua. Maybe that kingdom fell and he joined another faction, kind of like Ramza, I guess, in Tactics. He kind of goes rogue, does what he thinks is right. But it's possible. I mean, if there's literally places called the Twin Kingdoms, maybe there's twins in both kingdoms, and these are the two twins. It's like a parallel.
That's wild.
Could you imagine? That'd be
wild.
just weird as hell. But no,
Alex, I like that you mentioned Ramza and his sort of evolution that we see in Final Fantasy Tactics, because that could be something that is very high potential, because I was reading on Yoshida, and he is apparently a huge fan of Matsuno.
Yeah.
And apparently it's the reason he started developing video games, because he wanted to get the chance to work with Matsuno. Matsuno, obviously, the director of Final Fantasy Tactics. So I can totally feel some Ivalice vibes within this Final Fantasy 16 reveal trailer. So that's awesome.
I would love that.
Oh, I think we all would. Outside of Final Fantasy 7, I feel like Final Fantasy Tactics is the Final Fantasy game that we all agree on.
The one other thing I want to mention is the Phoenix versus Ifrit or whatever. They seem shocked at the end that there's a second fire. So it seems that each of these groups has these dominants, and they can channel or summon or whatever one elemental icon. And so it's apparent that something happens where Ifrit appears and he's not supposed to. This has never happened before, theoretically. And that causes this big battle we see. And so it must be fairly significant, given that those are the two, as we discussed, kind of characters in the logo. Something happened here.
Yeah.
But again, there's a lot of nods at twins, right? If these two characters were twins, and there's twin kingdoms and there's twin fire icons, at this point you could look at that and try and draw something from that. But again, I think Joe's right in that it'll just be a time skip, and there's probably only one main character. I will add also that I feel like they kind of wanted to get some Witcher vibes. I don't know if you guys saw that. You guys are way into Witcher than I'm, but the fight scene with the Marlborough in the swamp.
Yeah.
I don't really know the Witcher that well, but as soon as I saw that with casting fire baseball with his left hand while holding a single sword in the other, it felt very Witchery to me.
Yeah. Velen vibes, big time Velen vibes.
And I'm sure that was on purpose. But
definitely a huge, if not The Witcher, then definitely for sure a huge Western RPG influence, at least aesthetically, if nothing else.
That's true.
In this game.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we were all in agreement when we did our kind of list of what we wanted in the next Final Fantasy. We wanted a return to a high fantasy setting. Specifically, I love medieval themed games. And this is very like archetypical medieval, right down to English accents on, I think, the Archduke's mother. So it was kind of weird seeing, English accents. For some reason, to me, it just seems so strange to have like that type of English accent.
I think I feel like Final Fantasy 12 had a lot of English accents.
They did, but for some reason,
Vaughn and Pinello didn't, but I feel like everyone else did.
These ones felt different to me. I don't know. They seemed odd. But yeah, I like the medieval setting. I love when you have add more factions to games. I love having factions. So the more kingdoms you can shove into a plot line, I will take it.
Me too, Joe.
So I like that. What I will say is it all seemed a bit generic. The setting, the characters, even the main characters, to me, they seemed a bit generic. Not the unique, I guess, anime style that I guess I've come to expect from Final Fantasy. And I know I've actually complained about some characters, specifically like Rufus in Final Fantasy VII Remake, being a little too bizarre with his outfit and his like anime styling.
Yeah, belts.
But I feel like the characters in this need a bit of sprucing up and a little kick of like anime and uniqueness, because they're, to me, like that main character he doesn't scream main character to me. The only reason I know he's the main character is because like you start with him, he's the first thing you see, but he's not notable. So very similar to, you know, the Final Fantasy 15 cast was forgettable to me, completely forgettable and very generic. And I feel like this is the same. I think the character cast looks weak. Now, I think that will be saved by the fact that I mean, obviously we don't know much about the story, but I think the story looks like it has good potential. And I know the story in Final Fantasy XIV has gotten a lot of praise, especially through the expansion. So I think they can bring that to this as well. So I have faith in the story, but I just wish it didn't look as generic. And I think that's actually the main thing that, like, I think I could have been hyped from a reveal trailer, but the reason I say it's been activated, but I'm not feeling super hyped, is just it looked a bit too generic to get me hyped. So
Joe, I see your point. Like, I totally see where you're coming from. To me, I like the look of the characters. I think at the very least, the world seems consistent. Because like Final Fantasy 15, I think to me, like Noctis is a memorable, and he's like a good looking Final Fantasy main character. He's what you expect. He's kind of what you would want. And that main party of 4, they just seemed out of sync with the rest of the world, you know? Like, I felt like that Final Fantasy 15 really struggled with consistency in terms of its look, specifically. So I think for this game, what I'm really liking about it is the consistency of the world, of, you know, the outfits, and even you mentioned accents and whatnot. I like that they seem to have a consistent English sort of cast of voice actors. They're really going for that sort of Game of Thrones vibe almost.
Yeah, I don't think any of it's a deal breaker for me. Like if that was the way that they decided was the art style of the game, as long as the story's there and the world is interesting, then I'm fine with that. I especially, I don't mean to like knock the accents. They were just surprising to me. They're perfectly fine. Yeah.
I also think it's a nice break for me to not have Nomura designing these characters clearly. I think that's adding to the consistency of the look for me. Because Nomura's all over the place. He is obviously an amazing character designer. He's designed some of the most iconic video game characters of all time. But then you also have Rufus in Final Fantasy VII Remake, whose bottom half is just fucking insane belt buckle nightmare. So I don't know. Just a couple quick facts here about the development of the game. So from what we know, this is developed by Square Enix Creative Business Unit 3, which previously worked on Final Fantasy XIV, the original, and A Realm Reborn, from what I can gather. They also worked on the Dragon Quest Builders series and Final Fantasy XI, as what was formerly known as Square Enix Business Division 5. So we got the whole Realm Reborn crew working on this game. That's very promising. Realm Reborn is, you know, well loved and still going strong to this day. The game is produced by Naoki Yoshida, who is otherwise known as Yoshi P, and he is known mainly for his work on Dragon Quest X as the chief planner, which is another MMORPG, and Final Fantasy XIV. That's his main claim to fame as the director and producer of that game.
And
now,
Xavier.
Did he direct the original, or did he just direct A Realm Reborn?
He fixed it.
Yeah, I think he just came in with A Realm Reborn. I don't think he did the original.
Okay, because I was looking online. I didn't look too much, but I wasn't actually sure if he had worked on both. But that's great. If he didn't have anything to do with the original, then that's
he may have had something to do with it, but I don't think he was like the director. Like, I don't think he had control over the project at the very least. He may have been involved, but I don't think he was not. He was not responsible for what was the original launch of Final Fantasy XIV.
He was watching from the sidelines, being like, "Oh no,
I think so.
We're fucking up." Yeah, because he clearly had a plan when he came into that role, right? To fix a game like that. That's incredible. That alone should give us a lot of hope for this game, because to be able to turn something like that around.
Yeah, Yoshi P has
amazing.
A ton of credibility. Like, he's probably, to me, the most trusted person within Square right now.
Yeah, so he is the producer of this game, like I mentioned, but the game is directed by Hiroshi Takai. Now he's a bit of a lesser known quantity, I guess you could say. Um, he is known for his work on the Saga series, which I absolutely cannot stand, and the director of The Last Remnant, which is a lesser known action RPG from the PS3 era, as well as being an assistant director on Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn. So he's been working with Yoshi P for a while, it seems like. So that's good. They probably know each other well enough that there'll be a good partnership for this game.
And he has been involved with Square, I think I saw since 1991, and he's been in different roles on different Final Fantasies. But I think this is like the culmination of his career, to have the opportunity to direct a mainline Final Fantasy. This is kind of his.
It's a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity
for a lifetime of service to the company. I don't think you could have announced anyone else to be the producer of the next kind of Final Fantasy XVI mainline franchise other than Yoshi P that I wouldn't have been concerned given all of Square's recent troubles. But to me, Yoshi P is kind of a known quantity within Square Enix, and I trust him to make a good game. Like, he came in and he turned around a disaster of a game. He had to clean someone else's mess. It's probably harder to do that than to just make your own game from scratch in the first place. And he did it with kind of a no-nonsense approach. And I think what I like the most about him is he's a huge Final Fantasy fan, and he knows what we as hardcore kind of Final Fantasy fans that grew up during the PlayStation era of games want, and he wants that too. So he's a guy who I think is on the exact same page as gamers. So I trust him. I'm not worried that this game is going to be terrible or anything like that. I think it's going to be a great game, but we'll just see how great he can make it.
So yeah, I'm really excited for this. When the original 14 came out, I was working at a comic book store, and one of the regulars, who's there almost every day, had been playing since launch of the original 14. And when it was announced that they were doing A Realm Reborn and Yoshi P got involved, he knew I love Final Fantasy and was interested in the game. And he would keep me updated. And Yoshi P was so heavily involved with the community. He recognized, as Joe was saying, everything people wanted in terms of classic Final Fantasy. Like, this man knows what Final Fantasy should be. And that's, again, as Joe said, I have no doubt that he will perform and that this will be as true a Final Fantasy game as you can get. I think, like Joe was talking about the designs, I didn't want to say anything, but when you look at this main character, especially the Punished version or whatever, he looks very similar to like the main character in the CGI for Final Fantasy XIV. The one who's like the warrior in Dark Knight and Dragoon and all those CGI trailers and stuff. I think he looks very similar to that. So, and even the character designs feel very 14 to me. I feel like this is going to be 14, the single player game. So again, I expect it to be open world in that similar style, probably more polished, but I think that's what it's going to be. And I think it's going to be fantastic.
I completely agree. I think it's for people who've played Final Fantasy, saw the great story, especially in the expansion, and said, I wish the mainline series could just give me this. Yeah.
The only other thing about the development team that I'll add that I don't know if you have on your list or anything is that and it's kind of niche topic, but the combat designer from Devil May Cry actually joined Square Enix a while ago, and apparently he's been working on this game. So a lot of people are expecting the actual combat not to be turn-based at all, but to be very Devil May Cry and action-oriented.
I believe the combat designer actually came out and said that he doesn't think that turn-based combat has a place in games anymore.
Oh my god.
So I think his opinion is that turn-based is just, you have to leave it in the past and you have to let it die.
Harsh.
Well, that is a incorrect stance in my opinion. It's definitely not dead, but this game is 100% not turn-based. I think that's obvious from the trailer. So we are very positive on the development team of Final Fantasy XVI. Given the quality of 13 and 15, you could tell there were some huge issues with development. It seems like this team is on board with each other, and they're going to work together to produce something that is Very, very good. So a little bit of further clarification from Yoshida that we actually got after the official reveal of the game during the PS5 event. So a blog was posted on PlayStation's official site written by Yoshida, confirming his role within the game, along with revealing that Hiroshi Takai is directing and giving up more details on the game's development. Quote, the exclusive footage, compromising both battles and cutscenes running in real time, represents but a fraction of what our team has accomplished since the start of development on this and all new Final Fantasy game. In that span, the team's size has grown from a handful of core members to a full-fledged unit that continues to polish and build upon what they have created so far, all to provide players an experience unmatched in terms of story and gameplay. Later in the month, during the Tokyo Game Show, which was held in late September, Yoshida clarified in an interview that the entire trailer features in-game scenes rather than a pre-rendered selection of footage. Quote, I saw some comments from Americans saying that if we release a trailer that was all pre-rendered, they wouldn't see the game until 2035. So we decided to release a proper trailer. Yoshida also went on to tease when we will learn more information about the game, which is very tantalizing. We're focusing on development right now. At the end of October, we'll open a FF16 teaser site with info on characters and the world. And the next big info will be in 2021, end quote. We also got a little bit more from the Bloomberg journalist and industry insider, Jason Schreier. He suggested that it won't be too long before we get to play Final Fantasy 16. Apparently, Square Enix has been working on the Final Fantasy 15 follow-up for at least 4 years in some capacity. So it's coming sooner than people think. So very positive revelations here after the showcase in terms of how far along this game is in development, which is good because the last few game releases have been a fucking roller coaster. So Alex, when do you think this game will be released? Just give me do you think it's going to be 2021? Or is it going to be longer?
You know what? I think their original intent was probably 2021. I don't know what COVID could have done to that. I guess it's safe to say 2022, but I guess optimistically, we could say 2021. I think that was probably the goal because I think they were probably thinking Final Fantasy VII Remake 2020, Final Fantasy 16 end of 2021, and then maybe Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2, maybe the end of 2022. So it would be like one a year essentially.
Yeah.
But
I'm kind of thinking the same thing. It's definitely sooner rather than later in terms of at least what it normally takes to develop a mainline Final Fantasy game. The revelation that it's all pre-rendered footage, that it isn't pre-rendered footage is really, really promising. I say 2022 optimistically, spring 2022. And I think we'll probably get an event sometime in maybe March, April this year, 2021, where they will announce a release window of 2022. That's what I think is going to happen. And I think they'll do an event similar to what they did with Final Fantasy 15 when they had that big release date announced, which they then later had to delay again because the game wasn't ready.
This isn't shocking to me at all, though. I think it was announced, they created a Final Fantasy Council and everything a couple years back, and I know Yoshi P was invited on there because he did such an amazing job with the community in Final Fantasy 14, and I think there were rumors that he was working on a project, and a lot of people thought it was a mainline Final Fantasy. I guess the only question is, what was that? Who's the guy who did 15? Who came in and fixed 15? He left.
Takada. What is it?
Takada? Yeah. So he had his own team. Is it Luminous? Something like that?
Luminous.
Are they working on Project Athia or whatever it's called? Okay.
Yes. But he is no longer with them. But
that's their project because I knew they were working on a new IP. I thought that was AAA, but that's Project Athia. I wonder if that'll get redone into Final Fantasy 17 at some point.
I don't think that. I think it'll be a spin-off. I think it'll be a Final Fantasy spin-off. Yeah. Joe, what's your prediction on release date?
I think in spring, probably around March, that they're going to announce a holiday 2021 release date. And then I think it's going to
very
get delayed
interesting.
after they announce a holiday 2021 release date.
Okay.
That's my bold prediction. I'll specifically even say November 2021 release date. But
that's you were probably going to be so right, Joe. Just like you were right in our ranking Final Fantasy episode, you pretty much predicted this game.
Yeah.
Or you didn't. I don't know if you predicted, but this is what you wanted, basically. This is what you asked for.
Yeah. Well, I'll say
sort of seems to be what you've got more or less.
My entire vibe from this game is that compared to some of the recent attempts at games that they've made, this seems like a very safe attempt at a game.
I agree.
At a Final Fantasy game. It's probably going to be packed with nostalgia like Yoshi P loves to pack into a Final Fantasy game, and it's going to be very classic, traditional. It's going to be that, I guess Final Fantasy IX that we talked about, which kind of pulled back a little bit from the major advancements in gaming and gave a classic, solid Final Fantasy experience. That's what I'm expecting from this.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. To me, it's definitely heavily influenced by Final Fantasy XIV with a little bit of 12 and 9 sprinkled in for good measure. That's what I'm kind of getting out of this game.
Yeah, well, I think that's because 14 takes a lot of influence from those early games.
True.
Especially since Yoshi P took over and added more of those elements into it. Because that was one of his big contributions, was to add the fan service back into Final Fantasy 14 when he took over.
I guess what I'm getting at, I think what I mean is the look is 14.
Yes.
Very 14. And the setting is more probably Final Fantasy, somewhere between 9 and 12. Because 9's very cartoony, so I don't get those vibes from this game at all. Whereas 12 is a bit more mature, and a slightly darker fantasy world, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
slightly.
It may even go back further than that to NES. Classic NES Crystal.
Oh well,
type
yeah,
vibes,
100%.
right?
100%.
Which,
I guess I say 9 because 9 is a sort of a summation of those early games.
Yeah.
And that's the only kind of 3D mainline Final Fantasy that we have actually got, really. That and 12. That is like a medieval setting.
I think,
not counting the online games.
I think the generic vibe might be a throwback to the early NES.
Okay.
That's
Fair.
completely just a dig at the generic nature of the game so far.
I'm sure it'll be more detailed. There'll be more character once we get into it. Again, we don't really know the details of the kingdoms and all that stuff and the political dynamics and stuff. I'm sure once we get into it, it'll be a bit more.
We've been throwing around the generic word a lot in this episode, I think for me, while this game, I totally see how it can be seen as sort of generic. To me, like Final Fantasy 15 and 13 were generic Final Fantasy games. Like they weren't generic in this traditional sense. They were generic, like trying to be Final Fantasy games that are just trying too hard to be Final Fantasy games. You know what I mean? Whereas this is more generic in its sort of Western RPG setting, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's the whole generic thing is really just a function of them taking inspiration from an MMO. MMOs by nature are a bit generic, like in terms of characters mainly. So,
right on. Okay, so let's get into some final talking points here. I feel like we've covered most of sort of what we can glean from this trailer and sort of everything else that's come out afterwards. But just a couple more talking points that I want to touch on here before we close it up. What do you guys think about a possible M rating? Do you think this is going to happen? I feel like it's very probable. This seems like possibly the darkest Final Fantasy mainline experience that there has ever been. What do you guys think on that? Is it going to be teen? What do you think?
I think it's going to be M. I think, honestly, just seeing the kingdoms, my hope is that it's something similar akin to like Final Fantasy Tactics in terms of storyline and darkness. And because if you made that game 3D, it'd be pretty dark, man. Like, there's a lot of death. You like delete a sister. You kill a lot of people who you like fight their relatives, and they're like upset that you killed their siblings and stuff. I mean, Delita kills his wife at the end.
Whoa, Alex! Spoilers for a 30-year-old game, buddy, or 20 fucking hour. But it's a 23-year-old game.
It is a very dark game. Like the father was actually killed by Daisadag, wasn't he? Like they poison a whole entire field of people. Like it's very dark. It's just betrayal after betrayal. And I hope we get something akin to that. That's what it's a very dark game. It's classic Final Fantasy. We got all these kingdoms. I hope it's in similar style to something like Tactics.
Speaking of Tactics again, I love the death noise that the characters make. Yeah, the characters make in that game. Love it. It's haunting, man, but it's amazing at the same time. Beautiful. The death wails of 2D sprites on a fucking 3D polygonal field is just beautiful to me. Joe, do you agree with Alex? M rating?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really plugged into what goes into making games rated. I never pay attention to ratings myself, so. But I guess, I mean,
I'll tell you a few things. Use of drugs, sexual content, and violence. Those are the three main things I think that go towards it being M rating.
Yeah, I mean, the blood splatter all over the kid's face is obviously a sign. But
yeah,
I don't know. I think one thing I could say is they could look at something like Witcher 3 as like, okay, yeah, we can do it. We can have a really successful, well-selling M-rated game. So.
Okay. I also think it will be an M rating, and I hope that it's an M rating because I just think it makes sense for this setting and everything we've seen. Okay. So here's a little question for you. I know, Alex, you said you think it's going to be open world. I think you said that. I think, Joe, you might have mentioned that you assume it's going to be open world as well.
I don't think it's going to be like completely, well, probably similar to most open world games, I guess. So it'll be areas. It'll be like, it's open world in the sense that you're introduced to a big area that you have to do story missions in. When you do those story missions, you'll progress into another area. I don't think it'll be just completely open world. Like you can't just go anywhere you want.
I think it'll be like 12.
FF12?
Yeah, but probably slightly bit like think like Horizon. Zero. Did you guys play Horizon? You guys didn't play Horizon. You're essentially I think it's just going to be a segmented open world. Okay. It's going to be gated.
See, I'm thinking that it's going to be more linear in terms of closer to Final Fantasy 12. Huge open areas, but a very linear path with probably side quests, and being able to go back and forth between different locations. But I think maybe this is more of a hope. I hope that it won't be open world. I hope we're getting something more linear, not quite as linear as Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't think it makes sense for just the environments we've seen so far. If you look at the combat, I think that's where we kind of get an idea of what the world's going to look like, and it does look somewhat open. So we'll see. It's more of my hope that it'll be more of a linear experience. I think that really suits Final Fantasy. I think we saw that with Final Fantasy VII Remake big time. That linear works and it can still be successful. So that's what I'm hoping for. Then again, it'll probably be open world. Joe, what do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with you more about wanting it to be linear. I would hate it to be linear. And to me,
poisoned by Western RPGs, you have been.
To me, the bare minimum of open world is something like FF12. I want at least open areas and lots of things to do to sidetrack me.
And that's what I want too. I don't. To me, that's not open world though. That's just. It's on the spectrum, maybe, but yeah. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want Final Fantasy 13 linear for sure.
Oh no, me either. No.
Yeah,
I'm thinking like Dragon Quest 11, dude. You kind of know what I mean? That level of openness, that would be acceptable for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm still adjusting my expectations when it comes to open world for Final Fantasy games. So I've come around a little bit to accepting some linearity, and I think it's just a matter. I'm willing to accept that they can go a little bit more linear than I probably want and still make a great game. I think Final Fantasy VII is probably pushing me into accepting that if it's well done and it's done correctly, I can accept a little bit more linearity. But I don't know. We'll have to see how it is. I think I used to be rock solid in the camp. It's got to be like as open world as possible. I want overworld maps. I want to go back to Final Fantasy VII style open world. Um, and I think I've softened and I'm cracking a bit. And this game will probably be a major influence, if it's successful or not in whatever it does, in determining more my attitudes towards open world and linear.
So what would, if you took Final Fantasy 15 and then you took that open area you had at the beginning and then you triple it and fill it with towns and side quests, but make it so that you can't jump to these other two areas till you finish a major event in the first area. Do you consider that open world? You know what I mean? Like it's like open world, but it's segmented into like different parts where you have to do this big storyline quest to get to the second part.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I still consider that open world. I think it's more of just, to me, you're on the world map and you look out and the draw distance there's no like cutoff point, basically. There's no like gated areas. To me, that's open.
Then I think we're getting that in that sense, yeah.
I mean, it's so much more doable now, and lots of games do big open worlds. So as opposed to, the games that disappointed me that weren't open world were at a time when I think open worlds were harder to do still. But now I think a lot of games are showing that you can do big open worlds. And you can do big open worlds that are filled with stuff and not just plain things. Like Final Fantasy 15, it was a big open map, but there was not a lot there.
There wasn't a whole lot
It
going
felt
on,
sparse,
right.
so they have to do better. I would rather take something a little bit more linear and less open than that. So
See,
again, that's where I'm kind of
that
cracking with open world, is that it's got to be done right, and a more linear experience done right can be better than an open world experience that's not done well.
Sure.
I'm just worried the industry is facing or will be facing an open world fatigue, if it hasn't already. So I don't know. I don't know if it would be best for this game. That's just me, though.
I think the fatigue comes in that there still seems to be a push in a lot of these open world games towards you have to make every open world bigger than the previous open world. And then it becomes hard to fill it with engaging things to do. But
smaller open worlds.
I'm okay with smaller open worlds.
One way to go.
I 100% agree. Smaller open world, fill it, make it feel alive. And I'm happy with that.
Well, dude, White Orchard in The Witcher 3, it's a tiny open world, but I love it. We talked about it in our Witcher episode. It's just a small area, but it's fucking great. You have had the time of my life in White Orchard.
Give me stuff to do and I will spend 10 hours in a town and consider that open, as long as I can run around and do whatever I want to do in it.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
So I think we've touched on most of it. I guess we could maybe talk a little bit more on the combat, but since there's no real HUD or anything, like we've seen gameplay in action, but there's no, we didn't see any menus. We didn't see anything really telling us, like, this game could be, you're literally just matching X for all we know and dodging. It could be that, or there could be some other underlying system for abilities and whatnot, which I assume there probably will be.
Well, there definitely is, because we saw signs of it. And that's actually one of the things that most excites me.
Okay.
Obviously, there's some kind of system to imbue yourself with the power of these icons.
Yeah.
So I think literally the most satisfying thing for me in this entire trailer was the Titan fists. Like they caught one of the enemies in like this combo of Titan fist that looked extremely satisfying, and I was like, I want to do that. So
it has some major implications.
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge. I think that's obviously going to be a key mechanic that differentiates this combat system. Is having special abilities derived from whatever. I assume that it's probably a case where you start with either none or maybe one
Phoenix.
icon thing that you've got, and then maybe as you defeat them, you kind of capture some kind of essence of them that allows you to use their abilities. That's what it looks like, because the same character is using, it looked like Phoenix, the wing, is using the Titan Fist, and it looks like Garuda claws. So I'm actually excited about that combat. Like, I know you guys were both looking forward to more turn-based. I think I'm okay with an action-based, like a really action-based, skill-based type thing. And Jeremy, I think you, having played Ghost of Tsushima recently, should also be excited for it too, because it looks like it's highly skill and reaction-based as well to me, just on first impression. So it looks like there's a lot of skill in it.
I have nothing against that sort of combat. I love that sort of combat. In RPGs, I just have a soft spot for turn-based. I'll always ask for turn-based, if I can get it. But I'm fine with it being action RPG. Like, no problems there. I just hope it's good, Alex, anything else you want to add on the combat?
No, I think Joe nailed it. I think the imbuement of like the properties of the icons or whatever is going to be a big thing. If I had to guess, knowing Yoshi P, knowing that he included materia in Final Fantasy XIV, but that we currently have Final Fantasy VII Remake on the go, and he's not going to use that mechanic when that's aligned with that game, I think we could get Magicite as like an equipable thing, similar to 6. Maybe
that makes sense based on the setting, the story, what we see.
Maybe somehow those are related to like the crystals or whatever, the icons, and that's how you learn and imbue these different summon powers or whatever.
I want to know how you get these abilities imbued onto your main character when it seems to be that the icons are attached to what is called the dominant, which is attached to these certain characters. Like we see Joshua, like to me, the Phoenix came from him, that's what I got out of it. So I'm wondering how that's all going to work out. Maybe that's just my interpretation.
I wonder, there's a scene where Joshua looks like he's healing the main character's hand, but I wonder if that's some
giving him his abilities
thing where he's like transferring, and maybe if you're on the faction of one of these dominants, maybe they can imbue you with the power somehow.
So like,
I mean, that's pure speculation, but
in is it the Final Fantasy 15 movie, the king, what are they called? Those guys with the knives who teleport? They essentially, the king imbues them.
Kingsglaive?
Yeah, the king imbues them with powers of the crystal, and they can kind of borrow it. Yeah. Something similar to that.
Okay. Yeah. That's kind of what I was thinking. They'll explain it in some way. Obviously, but I think you're definitely going to get abilities from the summons. It just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. And actually, Alex, you said another thing that kind of raised an interesting point about this game, and I think throughout that entire trailer, I think they're basically getting rid of like technology completely. Almost, it looks like it's pretty much completely medieval setting with like no steampunk elements at all. Like,
what about airships? Will there be airships? That's technology.
I think they're moving away from it. I think they're going back to like pure medieval, no technology.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. And
that's why, like, I don't remember if Magicite is inherently linked to technology at all. Because I just think FF6 is obviously this like the stereotypical steampunk Final Fantasy setting.
Yeah. I think Magicite, like materia, can kind of take the form of just some kind of, it's essentially the same thing. It's some kind of crystallized version of the powers of an Aeon or a summoning creature. So I feel like that's kind of just how they would dumb it down. It's just like a piece of their form. But I agree. I think if there is technology or airships, it'll probably be like they do in the older games where it's from like an ancient civilization. And maybe they'll tie that to another game's world or something just for fun. But
well, that's awesome, guys. I love all of your opinions on this. And I would say you guys have opened my eyes to a few things. Before we go, anything else you guys want to add about this game?
Pumped. No, just really excited. Hope we get it sooner than later. Hope that it delivers and we get a great storyline and it's better than 13 and 15. I hope this is the best Final Fantasy mainline we've had since 10, and with JoyCircuit at the helm, I think that's very possible.
Yeah. For me, I feel like doing this podcast, I've become more excited about the game already. But I think final thoughts. I like particularly all of the factions that we're seeing. I hope that they get into some convoluted politically faction-driven story and tie in a lot of stuff like we get from tactics. I want to see some crazy twists and turns and backstabbings, and that would make I think the game would be amazing if they do that with the setting that they've kind of set up for us already.
Side note, I hope we get an evil church. I want an evil church. I want this church, some kind of church organization that's doing some shady shit. I feel like that always adds to you have the political thing as the main thing, and then church on the side, ultimate baddie. It's always
the Crusaders. There's a Crusader faction.
Oh,
that could be a church organization.
There we go. It's gonna be incredible.
That's getting me hyped, dude. Final Fantasy Tactics vibes.
Yeah, man.
In this game. Ivalice. Thank you for listening to our episode on Final Fantasy 16 speculation. We're really hyped for the game. If you like this podcast, please follow us on Spotify or any other audio podcast services that you may be listening to us on. We would really appreciate it. Maybe we'll even get on Apple one day. Who knows? That would be something fucking spectacular. I'm not going to hold my breath, though.